In the world of high fashion, beauty is worshipped like a god, flawless faces, perfect bodies, and glittering illusions. But behind the flashes of the camera, there are stories that never make it to the magazine covers. This is one of them. Paulina Porizkova, a woman who had it all. The refugee who became a supermodel, the girl who conquered Paris, the face that defined the 1980s. She was the dream every little girl was told to chase. Fame, love, success, all wrapped in elegance. But when the lights faded and the applause stopped, she discovered a truth more painful than aging or rejection: betrayal from the one she trusted most. After decades of devotion, Paulina would lose not just her fortune, but her faith in love itself. Yet, in the ashes of heartbreak, she would rise again, stronger, unfiltered, and free. This is not just the story of a supermodel. It's the story of a woman who faced the ultimate betrayal and turned her pain into power. The story of Paulina Porizkova doesn't begin with flashing cameras or designer gowns. It begins in a place where dreams were forbidden, Czechoslovakia, behind the Iron Curtain. In the cold grip of the 1960s, a young couple risked everything to escape a regime that crushed freedom. They left their little daughter behind, promising they would come back for her. But as the years passed, little Paulina learned what betrayal felt like before she could even spell the word. Her parents fled to Sweden, chasing a better life. Paulina was raised by her grandmother, a woman hardened by war, who taught her survival, silence, and self-control. The world outside was divided by politics, but inside her heart, Paulina carried only one wish: to be reunited with her family. Years later, that wish came true, but it didn't feel like the fairy tale she imagined. In Sweden, her parents were strangers. Her accent, her clothes, even her emotions marked her as different. She was an immigrant child in a world that didn't understand her. Then, one day, everything changed by accident. A friend took her picture for a small art project. The photo captured something rare, not just beauty, but mystery. The sadness in her eyes told a story no one could fake. That photograph landed in the hands of modeling scouts in Paris. They wanted her immediately. Paulina was barely a teenager, but suddenly, doors opened to a life she had never dreamed of: the life of a model. Her parents were hesitant. Paris felt too far, too dangerous. But Paulina saw it as an escape, a chance to reinvent herself, to prove she was worth something after all the years of feeling forgotten. In Paris, she entered a world that moved at lightning speed. Cameras, castings, competition, and yet, she adapted. The same resilience that helped her survive childhood now helped her conquer the catwalk. Soon, her face began to appear on glossy magazine covers: Vogue, Elle, Marie Claire. She wasn't just beautiful, she was haunting. There was a depth to her gaze, something that pulled people in. Fashion editors said she looked like she had a secret. And in truth, she did. Behind the glamour, Paulina was still the girl who'd been left behind, still chasing the feeling of being loved and seen. But to the world, she was a new kind of icon, not born of privilege, but of pain and perseverance. By 19, she was one of Europe's most sought-after models, living a life of luxury she once couldn't imagine. Yet, even then, as she stood under the blinding lights of Paris runways, there was a quiet question in her heart: how long does beauty last? And who will I be when it fades? Paulina Porizkova had escaped her past, but she didn't yet know that the hardest chapter of her life was still waiting to be written. By the mid-1980s, Paulina Porizkova wasn't just another pretty face. She was the face her image graced every cover, from Vogue to Sports Illustrated. She was everywhere: billboards, commercials, runways. The girl who had once been left behind now ruled the world that once ignored her. Her beauty was described as icy perfection, but those who met her said she was soft-spoken, curious, and deeply intelligent. She wasn't the typical party girl of the fashion scene. She was thoughtful, always asking questions about life beyond beauty. Yet, for all her fame, she still carried an emptiness. Success had filled her calendar, but not her heart. Then, in 1984, fate introduced her to someone who would change everything. Paulina was cast in a music video for a band called The Cars. The song was Drive. On set, surrounded by lights and cameras, she met the band's frontman Rick Ocasek. He wasn't the kind of man anyone expected her to fall for. Rick was older, quiet, with a face more striking than traditionally handsome. He had an artist's mystery, and to Paulina, he seemed like a safe harbor in a storm of superficiality. They were opposites, the radiant supermodel and the eccentric rock star. But something about Rick's confidence and intelligence drew her in. Their connection was instant, intense, and confusing to everyone watching. The press called them the beauty and the oddity. But Paulina didn't care. For the first time, she felt seen not for her looks, but for her soul. Rick made her laugh, challenged her thoughts, and spoke to her like she was more than a photograph. In 1989, they married, a ceremony that looked like a fairy tale. Fashion magazines called them the golden couple of the 80s. To the world, it was perfection. The rock star husband, the supermodel wife, the glamorous life. But behind that perfection was a quiet sacrifice. Paulina began stepping away from modeling, choosing love and family over fame. She wanted to build something real, something lasting. She wanted to be a wife, a mother, not just a muse. For years, she devoted herself to Rick and their 2 sons, believing she had found forever. But slowly, the cracks began to show. Rick lived in his own world, reclusive, distant, lost in music and art. Paulina often felt invisible, a supporting role in a story she thought they shared. Still, she stayed. She believed love meant loyalty, even when it hurt. And so, the woman who once conquered the world began to fade quietly into the background of her own life. She had traded the flashing cameras of Paris for the dim light of a domestic dream. And though she smiled for family photos, something inside her whispered, "You're disappearing." Paulina Porizkova had found love, yes. But she didn't yet know that this love, the one she built her entire world around, would one day be the love that destroyed her. For a while, Paulina Porizkova lived what the world believed was a dream. A loving marriage, 2 sons, and a beautiful home. She had traded the flashing cameras for family dinners, modeling contracts for motherhood. The tabloids still called them the perfect couple. But perfection has a cost. Paulina's world became smaller, a circle of family, home, and the quiet shadow of Rick's fame. While he continued to record, to create, to be admired for his artistry, she quietly began to vanish from the world that once couldn't get enough of her. She told herself she didn't miss it, the cameras, the attention, the constant pressure to be flawless. But every time she looked in the mirror, she noticed tiny changes, the lines around her eyes, the fading glow. And she realized something the industry never warned her about: beauty has an expiration date. In her 30s, the calls from fashion magazines slowed. In her 40s, they stopped. Paulina had been one of the highest-paid models of her era, a woman who once graced the covers of Vogue and Elle, now suddenly invisible. The same industry that built her had erased her without a goodbye. And at home, things weren't much better. Rick was distant, lost in his own world of music and moods. Their love, once electric, had grown quiet, complicated. He was a man who didn't need much emotionally, while Paulina was a woman who needed connection. They shared a life, but not always a bond. She often felt she was walking on eggshells, careful not to disturb his solitude. Still, she loved him deeply. She believed in loyalty and promises. She wanted to grow old with him, even if the marriage no longer sparkled. Years passed like this, calm on the outside, lonely underneath. She raised their sons, smiled at events, and posted the occasional nostalgic photo from her modeling days. But inside, she was asking herself a quiet, painful question: who am I, now that I'm no longer the beautiful one? In interviews, she spoke candidly about aging, about how women are made to disappear once they stop fitting into the mold. Her honesty surprised people, a supermodel admitting fear, loneliness, and invisibility. Paulina wasn't bitter. She was searching for meaning, for self-worth, for a way to exist beyond beauty. But she was also tired of being strong, of pretending she didn't feel forgotten. And though she didn't know it yet, the deepest wound was still to come. Her career may have faded, her marriage may have cooled, but the man she had loved for more than 3 decades was about to hurt her in a way no stranger ever could. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the one you built your life around. In September 2019, Paulina Porizkova's life changed in the blink of an eye. Rick Ocasek, her husband of 3 decades, was gone. She found him lifeless in their shared home, the man she had loved, cared for, and supported through countless storms. Shock and grief collided in her chest. For a brief moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't process that the person who had been her partner, her anchor, was suddenly gone. The world mourned Rick, the legendary frontman of the Cars. Fans, musicians, and celebrities poured out tributes. But Paulina's grief was personal, raw, and complicated. She loved him deeply, even through the distance and silence that had crept into their marriage. Then came the will. Paulina's heart sank as her eyes scanned the pages. Rick had left her nothing. Not a cent, not a word of recognition, no sign of gratitude for decades of love, devotion, and sacrifice. The reason, she later discovered, was a painful misunderstanding. Rick believed she had abandoned him while he was ill. All those years of loyalty, all the moments she had dedicated to family, all the sacrifices she had made, erased with a pen stroke. The betrayal cut deeper than any heartbreak she had ever known. It wasn't just about money. It was about the man she had trusted completely, the person she had built her life around, the person whose love she thought was unconditional. The media was merciless. Headlines screamed, "Supermodel left with nothing. Paulina Porizkova betrayed after decades of marriage." Every article felt like another wound. The world judged her, misunderstood her, and stripped her pain into a sensational story. Paulina faced cameras, reporters, and whispers from strangers, all while her own heart was breaking. She retreated into silence for weeks. Nights were the hardest. Empty rooms, echoing memories, and the cruel realization that someone she had loved more than life itself had turned away. But even in the midst of this heartbreak, something inside her refused to crumble completely. She realized she could not control Rick's actions, nor the media's cruelty, nor the world's judgment. What she could control was herself, her response, her voice, her future. This moment marked a turning point. For the first time, Paulina faced the truth of betrayal. It could destroy her, or it could be the catalyst that forced her to reclaim her life. She chose to fight. Not with anger or revenge, but with honesty, courage, and the rawest vulnerability she had ever shown. Because sometimes, the deepest pain births the strongest version of ourselves. After the shock of Rick's death and the betrayal of his will, Paulina Porizkova felt as if the world had turned upside down. The woman who had once been the face of international beauty, the queen of runways, now confronted a silence louder than any applause she had ever heard. Depression settled in like a heavy fog. Nights were long and empty. She questioned her worth, her choices, and the life she had devoted to love and family. The glamour of her past felt like a distant dream, a photograph she could no longer recognize. Loneliness became her constant companion, and grief pressed against her like an unrelenting weight. But even in darkness, Paulina found a spark, a refusal to disappear completely. She began sharing her experiences publicly, not as the perfect supermodel, but as a woman stripped bare by reality. She posted candidly on Instagram, unfiltered and makeup-free, revealing not the fantasy world of fashion, but the truth of her emotions. Vulnerability became her voice, and honesty became her power. Through these raw posts, she connected with thousands of people who had faced similar struggles, women aging in an industry obsessed with youth, people mourning loved ones, and anyone who had been betrayed by someone they trusted. Paulina realized her story could inspire others, that pain, when shared, could become a lifeline. She also turned to writing. Her memoir, No Filter, became a declaration of truth. Within its pages, she recounted her journey from refugee to supermodel, her marriage, the betrayal, and her fight to reclaim herself. It was more than a memoir. It was a manifesto of resilience. The process of writing was cathartic. Each chapter allowed her to process grief, to understand that her identity was not tied to fame or beauty or even Rick's love. She began to see herself as a woman of substance, intellect, and enduring strength, qualities that had always existed, even when the world only saw her face. Fashion, which had once discarded her, began to take notice again, not because of her youthful looks, but because of her courage, her honesty, and her presence. She became a symbol of empowerment, showing that life beyond betrayal and loss could be authentic, purposeful, and inspiring. Paulina Porizkova had discovered that true beauty was not measured in photographs or magazine covers. It was measured in courage, in the willingness to show the world your scars, and in the ability to rise after betrayal. Her journey through grief and betrayal was far from over, but she had reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her sense of self. And in that reclamation, she found a strength more luminous than any spotlight she had ever stood under. Today, Paulina Porizkova stands as a symbol of survival and transformation. The woman who once ruled the runways, who had been abandoned by the very person she loved most, has reclaimed her life, not as a supermodel, but as a voice of authenticity, courage, and resilience. Her memoir, No Filter, revealed the raw truth of her journey, the childhood of separation, the dizzying heights of fashion fame, the sacrifices of love, and the ultimate betrayal. Readers were captivated not just by her experiences, but by her honesty, the kind of honesty that inspires and empowers. Paulina's return to the public eye was not about glamour or youth. It was about truth. She began appearing in interviews, sharing her story of aging, grief, and empowerment. Makeup-free photographs and candid social media posts showed the world that beauty is not about perfection. It is about courage, resilience, and authenticity. Fashion brands began to celebrate her again, not because she was a relic of the past, but because she represented a new ideal, a woman unafraid to show the truth of her life, the strength to rise from betrayal, and the wisdom that comes with experience. She became a role model not only for women in fashion, but for anyone who had ever been discarded, overlooked, or betrayed. Paulina's story carries a universal message: life will challenge you. People you trust may hurt you. The world may turn away when you need it most. But the power to reclaim your identity, your worth, and your happiness lies within. She taught the world that resilience is the ultimate beauty and courage is the most radiant adornment. As the cameras flash once more, Paulina walks with a quiet confidence, no makeup, no filters, no pretense. She carries herself with dignity, strength, and peace. Behind her eyes is the story of a woman who faced betrayal, heartbreak, and invisibility, yet refused to be broken. Her legacy is clear. Paulina Porizkova is no longer defined by her beauty, her husband, or the pages of magazines. She is defined by her spirit. She is a woman who rose again, unbroken and unapologetically herself. From refugee to runway, from supermodel to widow, from broken to unbreakable, her life is a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring power of the human heart. Paulina Porizkova, the woman who faced the ultimate betrayal, stands today as a beacon of hope, proof that even in the darkest moments, one can rise, shine, and inspire the world.